Have you heard of something called Murphy's Law?
No.
So, Murphy's Law is a concept that states the more you fear something happening, the more that is likely to happen. So, if I was to spill, if I was, if I'm walking in the cafe and I'm thinking I'm going to spill my cappuccino, theoretically, it's going to spill. And the more that I'm thinking about trying to make sure that I'm saying the right thing, I'm very focused on my speech, the more that I stumble. So there's Murphy's Law is this kind of weird paradox where we kind of, well, we take the more control we try and take, the less control we actually have. And it's like I was trying to figure out why this happens. And I think it's because your your kind of brain is trying to like zero in on whatever's happening, and your body's on like more high alert. Um, and when you do that, you're not like flowing.
Mm.
It's you're it's kind of like you're still sleeping with one eye open, and it it did kind of make me think it's kind of some law of attraction type stuff, but I'll pause there, and if you had any sort of psychology ideas, why that might be a thing.
Yeah, I guess I can only speak from personal experience, but it makes sense in the sporting world. There's no doubt about that. The more you focus on trying to score the ball, I think the more likely you are to miss. Whereas you have to focus on shooting the ball, which is almost independent of the outcome. You think about the form and the power and the lift and the arc you put on your shot and where you aim on the basket or which area of the backboard you want the ball to sort of ricochet off for it to drop in the net. Those are the things you're thinking about. If you fixate on the thing you don't want to happen, which is missing, I guess, then you're not thinking about the process that will lead to you avoiding that outcome. If that makes sense, you're not thinking about shooting, because shooting the ball well is what will like reduce the risk of that thing you don't want. And it makes a lot of sense. I think you fixate on the things you don't want, the more you'll notice them. Where your attention goes, the energy flows. As sort of woo woo as that phrase sounds, it has some truth to it. Um, and we should be very careful, I think, of the statements we say to ourselves when we're anticipating an event or how it might go. It's very easy to get caught up in. I mean, I do. I think everyone does it, in sort of rumination about a specific outcome you want. Where maybe sometimes it's better to just again stay in the moment and focus on the process and see what happens with good intentions rather than fixating on any outcome.
Yeah, I can see why it'd make sense in a basketball context, but I think the solution's a weird one because we have to be very conscious of our emotions and kind of not give them power. It's like the email I got today from the head of security asking for me to take the podcast stickers down. If I gave that power, is it more likely to happen? Well, maybe. I think there's something in it that our emotions define like the world around us, and because if the opposite, right? If you're already in love, the world is like a better place. The the way that you move through reality, like it changes. And I also think about this with how I think there's a link towards like performance here, and how we have how we feel, and then that directs into the way that we're performing in the world, and how we're in the way that we're playing a role. And Camus said this really smart thing that I like when he said, if someone's playing a role, even a role that's played, even like they're playing like 100 different roles, all those roles are illusions, right? But if you look at them all together and you uh, place them all on the table, you'll still find like common patterns. And things that you can pick up that are like common denominators among all those roles. So you pick up that person's energy, and you still pick up like patterns about their emotions. And so I feel like there's behind the performance is like always how someone's feeling. And that's why when you think about someone that's a bit grumpy or miserable, that is because it's a outward manifestation of what inside they're feeling.
Mm. Yeah, I think emotions are a real form of communication. And like there you've touched on, okay, somebody's emotions or someone's regular state of emotion or regular emotional responses to things can tell us a lot about their personality and their temperament, generally speaking. I think there's some truth in that. Um, and I also think your emotions inform you a lot about yourself and the way you respond to situations, you can learn about yourself. I remember like back at first year of uni, we looked at how emotions are a metric or a way your nervous system communicates to you about how it feels things are going on and how you are positioned in that like social hierarchy or that environment. So like if you're feeling very enthusiastic and very energized and very grateful, then you're probably in a good place. You're probably quite good at what you do. You're on that like magic line between like doing the right thing and doing something that feels enjoyable. It's like your conscience isn't pulling you back, but you also don't feel incompetent. You're in that nice good spot. And then emotions like depression and anxiety, they're when you're fixated on the past or the future, or you're not in a good position in the social hierarchy of that environment. You're not where you feel you should be um, in that context. And I think emotions tell us a lot. They tell us more than maybe our thoughts can, because our thoughts can be deceived a lot more by your emotions in a way that you can repeat the same thought to yourself, like I am great, or I'm good enough, and or, I'm really good at this thing, but it doesn't really hit home if it doesn't affect your emotional state. Like you can't think your way out of pain. I think there's something more fundamental about emotions and how they can teach us about ourselves and others for sure.
What is it? Thinking your way out of overthinking is like snitching your way out of a cocaine addiction.
That's it. That's Chris Williams' line, isn't it? Something like that. But it's true. It's
Yeah.
true. It just trying to think more is like making the whole bigger and bigger and bigger, whereas changing your emotional state or behaving differently, doing something different is like climbing out of the hole.
Mm. And I feel like this Murphy's law, fear also, I think it adds more weight to whatever decision it is, so that outshines other decisions. And I think that's the way that anxiety works a bit as well.
Mhm.
And it's weird. I mean, I don't know how often you feel fear these days, but I feel like as you get older, it decreases a lot. And I I don't really feel it on a daily basis unless I'm doing something that's outside my tolerance. I think I used to feel it a lot as a kid, and maybe that's because children are more like susceptible to s- like making decisions that they haven't made before, and there's more anxiety because everything's more newer.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I was going to say. The world's full of novelty, or the world's full of unexplored territory. So it's full of unknown threats. And do you think this right? Do you think if you're coming into a situation, you're already afraid of what might happen, you're then in a fear state. You're in like a prey animal state. You're in a high vigilance, very like high threat detection state, and that is going to make the potential threats more prevalent. Then maybe you'll focus on the negative more. You'll perform lower, and you're more likely to justify your feeling of fear. I guess like you'll pay more attention to things in that situation that will justify your fear. So like I don't know, just to pluck an example out of obscurity, you go into a house party or a social situation, and you have that fear, that social anxiety, you're way more likely to notice the ambiguous comment that somebody might say about you, and start evaluating it negatively to justify your feelings. Oh, they said that thing about my outfit. Maybe they did mean that I look a bit trashy, or that I shouldn't have picked this color of dress or jumper or whatever, than the person that goes into that situation confidently or just neutrally, and they will see the positive way that people smiled when they entered the room, or the nice thing somebody said. They're more likely to focus on the compliment, and that ambiguous statement that affected the anxious or fearful person may not even touch their conscience. It's almost like our emotions towards a situation put us in a state of readiness to experience that situation in that way. Like when I play sport, okay, like I guess like games when I feel the pressure to perform, I'm definitely way more noticed of shots I missed or like mistakes I make. Whereas games that feel like what I feel like I am very capable of getting the job done, it's like I can play the same level, but it will just feel more comfortable. And I think, do you think there's something to this, that we almost validate our own emotions, like our
Mm.
anticipated emotions, when we're in the situation by
Mm.
looking for things that justify it?
I think it's a big tolerance because for you, if you played European tournament for the first time, you're gonna get more fear than if you're doing it for the second time, right?
Yes.
So if you have proof, then it's like the proof outweighs the fear because you've already been in that situation. So a lot of fear is just like not being in that, like not meeting yourself in that situation before.
Yes. And I think it's also a lot of like a good lesson to take away for everybody, me, you, everyone listening. Like, if something's uncomfortable and induces fear, but you know it's genuinely worthwhile, there is just some power of just being able to eat shit and just sit through it and just do it and just keep showing up. Because, like, if I look back on basketball specifically, right, we'll go there first. There are environments that I train in and play in now that would have terrified me 2 years ago. Terrified me. But now it's just normal. It's like my day to day was the fear of myself 2 years ago. And maybe that'll be the case in 2 years when I'm playing professionally, hopefully. Like me now, that's a terrifying idea of playing in a league where you're getting paid to be there. So there is pressure to perform, financially, and the state of play around you is so much higher quality. But in 2 years' time, hopefully that will just feel like my day to day. So sometimes you do just have to like just bear it and get through it. I mean, even with the podcast, like conversations we have now would be way too complicated for me and you 2 years ago. And hopefully in 2 years' time, the conversations will be more meaningful and more daunting because of that fact than the ones we're having now. But that sometimes should be the natural progression. You should always feel a little bit uneasy and fearful. I think it's just about being able to stop that from destroying your performance, I guess, and becoming too much.
I mean, the days that I feel my happiest are when I've done overcome fear a little bit. And I wanted to tell you something. There's something fascinating called Hick's law. And Hick's law says the more choices that we have, the slower our decision. And I think Hick's law is also why a lot of us feel fear, uh, because it's like this like there's too many options that we don't know which one to take, and we don't know which one could be right because there's just too many. It's overwhelming. And if we were to reduce options, then we decide faster. And this is big in like a marketing context, and a sales context. It's like I met this autistic family a while ago, or this family that had an autistic kid, and the mother was telling me that the kids can't, like, if he has like more than a couple decisions, he just like gets like crazy, like he can't deal with it. So if they went into like a supermarket and there's like four different types of cornflakes, he just like suffers from indecision. And that's just like prime like Hick's law. And I guess it's just weird how these like laws exist, how people have these couple guys have like found something in society, and it's like a common thing that all humans kind of experience, this kind of dark psychology, but also like it's weird how all humans have this in common, I guess.
Yeah, it shows we're all made from the same stuff, psychologically. Even we're not just talking, physically we're all human beings, but psychologically we all have something that is the same. Human nature is relevant to all of us. That decision fatigue idea is so true. I hate it. I hate having to make decisions. I hate having to make decisions where there are loads of different options. I hate having to make decisions where all the options are quite good. It's easy when there's like a handful and it's obvious which one is the best. That's not even a decision. That's just picking the obvious. Um, I think that's a managing cognitive load thing, managing attentional capacity. Um, our brain only has a certain amount of information it can process, and when there are so many options, there's so much to process. And especially somebody with I don't know, a more on the autistic end of the spectrum, the neurodivergent spectrum, will struggle with that amount of information processing. It's a lot easier for, I think, the average person to just shut out that and just pick the one you've always picked or stay in routine. And yeah, I don't know. Interesting. It's interesting. It's very true. That law makes a lot of sense just off face value.
It's like we can do anything, but we can't do everything. And I
Mm,
think this Hick's law applies a lot in social anxiety, right? Because if I'm in a conversation with someone, I could say anything. Like you have an unlimited amount of things to say. And I think it could be a big thing of social anxiety that you don't know what exactly to say and you start, like I said about the Murphy's law about trying to control things. It's like you want to
mm,
control exactly the outcome and you want it to be said perfectly. But in realistically, that's not how it works. And I wanted to add this other theory that I think this is one of the most valuable insights I got taught in my last sales job, and is quite an interesting way to view conversations. I don't agree with it fully, but it definitely is interesting. My old sales manager told me that every conversation that you've ever had has a cost and a value to it. So if if I'm speaking to a customer and I'm like, and they ask me how I am, and I said, I'm a bit chilly, it's raining outside. That is increasing the cost of the conversation because although it might not seem like it, I'm kind of low key complaining about the weather.
mm.
However, if I was to make a joke and about how this thing's so expensive, I know, then I've made them laugh and I've increased the value. And so you think to yourself, well, it made me think about how I approach conversations because you kind of only want to talk about the positives depending on how well you know the person. Maybe you go into the cost a little bit when you have a good relationship, but you want to make them feel good, right? You want to make them feel like they want to be there. And so I think the solution is to add value. And there's a prime example. So at my sales job, we had a call center to verify sales. And the people on the call center get paid minimum wage. They read from a script. These people are depressed. And so if you just call them up and ask them to do you a favor, they don't get paid enough to deal with that, so they're not going to do it. And so what I'd do is I'd call them up, I'd ask them what they're having for lunch, I'd tell them what I'm having for lunch, I'd make a joke about when they're finishing tonight. I'd flirt with them and I'd get them to do me a favor. But if I didn't do that, then then I'm not going to get the favor. Like if it was a man that picked up all the time, I would just give up and call him again until I got a woman because the men were just too like I don't care, mate. Um, and I think it's I think it is adding value, and then you take this apart and you say, well, every single conversation, whether it's like we spoke about this a lot before, but even sort of waiters and things and people that you meet uh even the bus driver, I guess, like if you were to build a relationship with them, they can make your life a lot better. And this is why I think for myself I reflect on being more of a introverted and quiet person at times. And I feel like being quiet, it's not necessarily bad because you're not increasing your cost, but it's not necessarily good because you're not increasing any value. So to be quiet is not doing either any good or bad. Um, and so you don't really want to be quiet. And so I think maybe suit this idea to your personality. Um, but I mean I remember being in this meeting once with a bunch of like high level law people, and there was this one woman that just like didn't speak throughout the meeting, and my lawyer friend said to me afterwards like he really didn't like that because you're being quiet is like you don't need to be in that room, and it's like you're not adding any value. But yeah, I'll probably pause there. Let me know what you think about that idea.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Let's briefly just touch on the beginning bit where you were talking about these two laws and then applying it to if you're socially anxious and you'll be fixated on trying to say the right thing. And you could literally say anything to that person. When they say, "How are you?" or "How's your day been going?" there is a multitude, there's an innumerable number of things that you've done that day or ways that you're feeling, ways you could describe how you're feeling. And I think that is from people I've spoken to and from my own experience of social anxiety, that is the process is you're almost frozen because you're struck by this indecision of like, I need this person to like me. I need to fit in or I need this to go well. So I need to say the right thing. And so I think we need an overall like resounding principle, I guess, to stick to make those decisions easier or that split second like decision on what to say or do easier. And is that then is that principle to do what feels right or feels truthful? Maybe. Is it based on the second thing you said then? Is that resounding principle to say something that is of value? And we're not talking, strictly economically or in business terms here, just like that will make you and that person feel better, that is considerate, that is caring, that is kind, or makes you more approachable to that person, or starts a conversation, or shows interest in them, or tells a good story. Like there is something to that, I think. And also your point on the potential like missed opportunity of being quiet or introverted. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you definitely don't want to be like low agency in a situation and just let everything go on around you. But equally, you don't want to be the person that talks too much or talks for the sake of it and then says something that makes everyone think, well, what are they on about? You know what I mean? Like that's not really relevant to what we're talking about anyway. And you've got Robert Greene's side of things where he said, say less than necessary, and sometimes silence is power. So it's nuanced, isn't it? It's nuanced. I think I think what we want to avoid is if you have something to say, then you can't censor yourself. If you feel like you have something to say that's valuable, that's meaningful, and you just stay sat on the bench and don't get involved in the game, then that's going to hurt you. But also talking for talking's sake, which is something I do a lot of the time, hey, because I basically don't shut up, is also dangerous in many respects. So it's complicated. I know what you mean, but I do that transactional view of conversation or that transactional view of every human interaction. It's cold, it's rational, it's unloving, but there is some truth to it for sure. I mean, I don't think we have to make it seem bad because me and you talk every single week and we provide value to each other. It doesn't mean that I only talk to you because you provide me some sort of value. Like I still like love you as my family and I still want the best for you in life. I'm not just here because of things I learned from you or things you do for me. It's more complicated than that. But at that base level, there is that transaction of talking to you makes me feel better in my day, and hopefully likewise. But I think if you're really interested, Jake, in looking more into stuff like this, there's a book I read a couple of years ago called Games People Play by a guy called Eric Byrne, and he basically breaks down a lot of common human interactions for what they're really about on like a very fundamental psychological level. I think you'd find it quite interesting.
Right. I think I've heard that book before. I
I may
think
I may have mentioned it a handful of times as well.
mm, I think maybe maybe it'd be nice if we were like a spiritually amazing human. We would be platonic and we would kind of try and love everyone as long as they're not giving us like crazy cost all the time. And that's the kind of utopian like detachment from this transactional idea.
Mhm.
Uh, from that book, what are the games that we like to play?
I just remember, like, I read it a long time ago, and I don't think I fully finished it at the time that I read it, but I remember it breaking, like, down the very basic human interaction of when you meet somebody and you say, like, "Hello, how are you?" Or it might be a stranger or an acquaintance, and him basically, like, red pilling me by saying, you don't really give a shit how they are, and they don't really give a shit how you are. All you're doing there is, like, validating that you've seen them and validating, right? Person A notices person B and acknowledges their existence by saying, "Hi, how are you?" And person B responds with something trivial to acknowledge that person A said something to them and that they noticed them. Because that saying, "Hi, how are you?" is so different to, when me and you have weekly catch up calls and I actually ask you, "How has your week been?" And I want detail and I want emotions and I want stories being told and I want characters. Um, and I want to know what the inner texture of your mind's been like this week, and things you've learned, and things you've improved on, and failures that you're going to rectify in the future. That's totally different to when I say, like, "You're right," to the guy at the petrol station. But they seem similar at surface level. So it's a good book for breaking down human relationships and human interaction, and you learn a lot about human nature from it.
Are you still that guy that like asks questions in lectures and stuff? Put your hand
No,
up.
no, but this is it. Like, I'm like stuck in this loop now because I barely go to my lectures. So when I do go, I kind of hide in the corner because I'm like, I don't want them to notice that I've barely been here. But some questions are so trivial that I'm like, I really just cannot be asked. Like when they're just like, I don't know, asking like, it won't even be stuff about the work really. It'll be stuff like, who here exercises enough according to the National Institute of Health's like suggested minutes of cardiovascular exercise a week? And I'm like, well, yeah, I do because I play sport, but like no one cares. Honestly, just I find it really difficult to engage. So maybe I've lost, I've lost so much enthusiasm for university. I really have.
But I
I,
think it's a large part of the lecturer's fault because asking easy questions, no one wants to be the person that answers an easy question.
yes.
And I feel like just the way that lectures are designed, right? Your head is kind of a bit everywhere as a student because you're taking notes and the PowerPoint's on the big screen, but it's also up on your computer. And you're kind of trying to multitask between trying to write everything down so you don't miss it and trying to pay attention. And I think the way that like the conclusion I've come to maximize my time in a lecture is really not take any notes and just pay 100% attention because
Mm.
like you can go back and kind of look at the lecture notes anyway, but you can't get the little bit that the professor says. And the reason I don't go to my lectures a lot is because some professors just read off the slides, and
Yeah,
I don't really believe in that. And yeah,
bro,
do you have any thoughts about like maximizing your time in lectures?
don't go. That's I no, it's just I'm a very specific case, right? So I can't talk for everybody or maybe anybody. If you're somebody that's serious about like your degree, you're a medical student or you're a law student or you're you're doing something deeply academic at a really like high grade university and your lectures are really important, then God, like go and smash out the park. There's a part of me that wishes I was like you, part of me that wishes I like pursued biology because I bloody love the A level and all that kind of stuff. But like my lectures now are painfully uninspiring. And that's because of the university that I chose to go to. I'm here because of my sport. I'm not here academically. And the uni, my undergraduate degree is just going to be a bit of paper that may get me through a door or two in the future that I'm not really going to look at again. So, like, bro, I've learned way more from doing the podcast in the last 2 years than I have at uni. It's, 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 I wish I lived in a world where, like, I go to a lecture and I'm like, wow, that was 2 hours of like inspiring stuff. Now I feel like it's refined the way I think about a subject matter. I'm like motivated to read more about it. But I think for me, my university's killed psychology. Um, so I think my advice is bad. I do like what you're saying about the paying full attention thing, and I wonder if I was like a if I had like seriously gone down the academic route, whether that would be a idea I'd go with. One final thing that I'll say, which is what I sometimes do when I am actually interested in the lecture, is my notes. I will open a notes page, but it won't be like information from the slides ever, because the slides are already notes in themselves that you can go and reference, like you said. But what I will do is if something resonates with me that the lecturer said, or something particularly resonates with me about the subject or about, there's a graph on the slides that has a particular result, I'll write that down. So for example, like the odd health psychology lecture, I'll just quickly get like this up, um, that I've had this year. There was this one we did. Was it this one? Yeah, like there was this one study that was about how the life expectancy in England has stalled, and that has not happened since like 1900, and health has stopped improving. And there was like this sick like graph that was basically saying like as quality of life improved, health span and lifespan improved up to a certain point into now we've got too much luxury and too much quality of life in terms of food and convenience and sort of sedentary lifestyles, that now that health like increase graph is stagnating and plateauing. So I like if something like lands with me and I go, "Ooh, that's it. That's actually really interesting." Then I'll write it down, but it might have nothing to do with the coursework or the
Mm.
actual like lecture itself.
I think we have a limited role that we can play as a student. I mean, I can relate to like occasional lectures that have gripped me, and how I think as a good student, what I remember I once like criticized how how my international business lecturer was telling me like this information. She was talking about how the country by country, uh how they value different things. And there was one where she said, uh that was it. There was this graph about how different countries, how individualistic countries are,
Mm.
and it was just like a score out of 100. And I was like to her, but what are you basing that off though? Um, and then she had to really think about it and found it was just like some surveys and stuff. But that made me like someone that she could tell that I was a bit sharper. But there's also a big side that I think the professors are responsible for. I mean, if you think about it, I think they're responsible for holding the students' attention, and that's what they're struggling with a lot because you can't hold. It's hard to with people's attention spans nowadays, and we want constant value. But I mean, if you look at Jordan Peterson's lectures, he's not reading off the slides. There's like
No,
a very minimal slide, and he goes on a 20-minute tangent, but everything's really linked. And he knows it so fucking well. He doesn't even need to like. He's trained and trust it, and I think that's what you've got to do with a teacher. And I think that's why, because I thought third year would be a bit different. Like you're in third year now. Like people are going to be fucking good, the lecturers. But it's the same. It's the same as the last 2 years.
yeah.
It's like an occasional gripping one.
And look, don't get me wrong. Like, if you're a top end university, like you're in Oxford or Cambridge or whatever, and you're speaking to an expert in their field that have just released so many great papers or has written a handful of books that have done really really well, and they know what the hell they're on about. God, I would listen. I would listen like a well trained dog waiting for a biscuit. Do you know what I mean? But like, I just don't. Maybe I'm a waste man, and it's just like a respect thing. But just my lecturers, I'm just like I don't. I, I I can't feel the passion coming from them about the subject anymore. And is that maybe a problem of what universities are told to teach? I don't know. It's just it's hard. It's painful, man. Um, so I think yeah, it's hard. It's hard to grip people's attention if you're not truly a master at what you do and truly able to grip people and say things that land with people and say things that really resonate. But the Pearson point's very true. If he that's what I thought university was going to be for me, and that's maybe why I got misinformed or deluded. But it's fine. it's a learning curve, and I think those people are out. Those lecturers, those teachers, they're out there. They exist, but they're just rare. They're just rare. Like
Mm.
anything in any like anyone in any field, there's real stars, real outliers are rare in the nature of them being outliers.
I think I wanted to go back a little bit to when we were talking about sort of relationships and sort of psychology like that, and I wanted. There's a couple kind of things I've been thinking about, and they're all kind of answering the same question. So I started with asking myself questions about like what character do we want to have, who do we want to be, what do we want to think, what ways I guess do we want to think, and then I came to a meta question of how do we know thyself, which is quite a profound question. And I think one way that we don't, what the wrong way to go about this is this Jean-Paul Sartre quote, which said that hell is other people. And when you first hear that, it's a bit like, whoa. But what Jean-Paul Sartre meant when he said hell was other people was that hell is being stuck inside someone else's perception or someone else's idea of who you are. And I think you touched on this a little bit last week with how maybe the world tries to create this idea about the average person and how we kind of like to box ourselves in, and how it's kind of niche as like herd morality, right? We want to be seen good in the eyes of the herd. And this is like a horrible thing though to get into. If because it's true. I think how is other people. If your self-worth is based on how people perceive you, which for a lot of people it is, then you're just completely like dependent on them. And it's why so many like I think about this like when you think about the stereotypical influencer, people know I think a lot of influencers are depressed. But I think the only influencers that are depressed are when they are when they have massive audience capture. Because their life is how people perceive them. And for this resonates. I think this resonated with me so much because I think I've I've only really had one bad relationship, and that was my first one, and that was because I experienced what it was like to be controlled. And if you're in a controlling relationship, that's a big part of your world. Your self worth is perceived on how much that person like appreciates you, and you're basically doing everything in there so that their picture of you is good, so that their thoughts on you are good. And then when that happens, then you start to really like lose actually like who you are. And so you definitely avoid controlling relationships by any means. Um, and I think maybe people have this to different degrees. I don't think people are totally like um in are totally dependent on this idea, but maybe we will all experience this a little bit. Um, so I've got some more ideas that are a bit different, but yeah, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's what Sartre's quote points to um, is very similar, if not the same thing, as one of the main messages from the book, The Courage to be Disliked, by the two Japanese philosophers. Their names sort of elude me at the moment, but one of their chapters or whole sections, I think, is called or talks about the idea that all problems are interpersonal relationship problems. Like all problems to mental health are to do with how you're linked to other people, to do with a superiority or inferiority complex, to do with attachment issues, or to do with how you feel you are in the social hierarchy compared to others. It's We are embedded in that social web, and that often defines how we perceive ourselves and our life, and therefore like the quality of our mental health and the texture of our minds. And I think there's some real truth to that. And that book talks a lot about how, you know, if 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 we didn't have other people, we wouldn't have the everyday sort of mental afflictions that we encounter, but we would be so stricken by loneliness that we'd probably kill ourselves anyway. So we're stuck in this tough situation where people are the cause of a lot of our mental health imbalances, but we also need them. We need them just like we need electrolytes and water and hydration to keep our physical body alive, our psychological body. We need social interaction. We need others. So what do we do about that? I think you're right in that we need healthy relationships, not relationships that mean that we censor ourselves and over monitor ourselves and manipulate our own behavior to an inauthentic level. Um, but we can't be a complete lone wolf. So I think Sartre, that's what Sartre was pointing to, that if you use other people as the metric for which you evaluate yourself and your life, that will never lead to a good end. Because even if you succeed in their metrics, it's still not your life. It's not your metrics. And so it will still ultimately be a failure. But it's a hard thing to do. And I think it's one of the 3 or 4 big core problems or core obstacles that you overcome through growing up as a person is finding out what is your thing that's not tainted by other people's mind. Like, what's the heaven that is in opposition to the hell that is other people and other people's perceptions and other people's opinions of you. So it's important. It's an important thing to discuss.
That's some really good thoughts. Yeah. Another angle on this question of how do you know thyself that I came to was, how do most people know thyself? And I really thought about this, and I came to a bit of a sad conclusion. I think a lot of people know thyself through the substances and vices that they go towards. So if I use the example of a university student, if I use the example of a third year university student who's like, I don't want to think about the future, um, to me, that is like not knowing myself. And like, I think people our age, they don't, to be realistic, they don't meditate and they don't pray because it's not stimulating. So I think a lot of people get a lot of their reflection upon drinking and drugs, because it gives you like, it shows you your truth in like, or in the real colors who you are, some extra like clarity. And so maybe like that's debatable. I think there's an interesting question of like, when you do get drunk or high, does the truth actually come out, or is what you're being told just like random? It could just be like an increase in emotional intensity that's louder because when you're drunk, you don't have as much logic as when you're sober. But I think if I do think about it a lot, I think the truth does come out a lot when we're drunk or when we're high. Like, I think it's kind of like your soul is like, it's it's like your soul's crying out, your right hemisphere is just going mad, and you're only able to get to that in those kind of states. And I think about it with uh the Nietzsche had this idea about the Dionysian and the Apollonian. I think we spoke about this before in this book, The Birth Tragedy, with the Dionysian reflecting this kind of surrender into intoxication and chaos, and the Apollonian representing these kind of like neat illusions of order that we give ourselves. And I think, I mean, this Nietzsche kind of came to the conclusion, one must still have chaos in one's life to give birth to a rising star, to a dancing star. And with like this chaos, is I think that's how we find the order. I think that's what it is. It's giving ourselves like a lot more chaos, to which order comes out on the other side. And I think also a lot of, I mean, that's kind of me thinking in the context of when something bad happens in like a trip or a drunk experience, then we fix it the next day. But I think there's also, you can kind of understand a lot of your passion, especially like when you think about creatively. I think that's also enhanced when you're under a substance. And yeah, like it's I think I told you about this before, but it's quite funny. I had a conversation with a girl on my course who was like, I'm taking this year to figure out what I want. Um, and then I was like, let's be honest, that basically means you're going to get paralytically drunk and you're going to think, oh, maybe I want to go into marketing. Um, and then I said to her, like, look, like, it doesn't take a year. um, I mean, if you want to do it that way, you can. But like, I can link you up with a shaman that can, like in Southampton, that can give you some ayahuasca, and you can figure out in 3 days if you want. I think that's a lot better than getting drunk. But yeah, I guess what do you think about this idea that I think people come to their personal truths when they are under a substance, and especially our age, and that's kind of the way that we're like directing our life forward.
I think some substances limit our ability to listen to ourselves, and some sort of open that channel more. And I think some people use vices or use substances to avoid asking themselves the deep questions, or coming to the answers to those deep questions, avoiding knowing ourselves, I guess. But there are some that open that channel, whether that's, certain substances that I believe open the mind more, those of the psychedelic nature, the hallucinogenic nature. But also I think, how about this as an extension to what you just said? Even if that person is sort of becoming like horrendously drunk all the time, and is going down that dark, dark hole, do they need to do that in order to be shook so much by it that they're like slapped in the face by life, and then they kind of then really like address those problems? Like Angelo, for example, last week talked about how he looks back on his time of drug taking and smoking weed all the time and drinking all the time and partying all the time as essential, because if he didn't do that, he wouldn't he wouldn't he wouldn't fall down so low to rock bottom that he like woke up and realized where he really wanted to be. It's like he needed to invest in the vices to realize that they're not what he wanted. And I think there is some truth to that. You kind of almost need to make things worse before you make them better, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
go on.
how many alcoholics then go on to do great things? It's a decent. They exist. Um, I mean, it's interesting because I think it's making mistakes, right? And you learn from your mistakes.
Mm.
And that's why I think like having a wild dog past can make you wise. It's like Joey Diaz, he is actually like a bit of a wise person.
Yeah, but no one would choose to have some of his experiences. Yeah. But he's
um,
made something of it. But how many people that go down that dark hole make something of themselves at the end, or how many of them just get consumed by it and never escape? There's that too.
I
Um,
think it's shadow work, and shadow work's not easy.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and I think the other last sort of part that I've been thinking about with this question, I think the healthy way to know thyself. This is all kind of an extension of our chat with Angelo, but say one were to chase excellence in their field or chase wisdom. Um, a quote comes to me that says, "There's an Isaac Newton quote that says, if I have seen further than most, it is because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants." And it's an excellent quote. And what it means is that we are the reason that we're competent, or the reason that we can look deeper into things and make better decisions, is because we've read the greats, or we've had the mentorship, or we've done the thousands of hours. Um, and now all that is kind of, we're now standing on all of those giants, and we're now seeing further than everyone else, and we're higher up on the mountain than everyone else. I think there's a painting a little bit that inspires this. with some guy kind of not too well versed. There's was one famous painting with I think he's like a war guy, a commander maybe, and he's looking over. He's standing on a mountain, and everywhere around is just clouds. There's nothing else there, and it's quite an inspiring one. But I think this is the way to make the way to know yourself is this because the connection of the mind and the world becomes more like clear. It's more complex, but it's more like you're more in tune. What comes from your mind kind of manipulate the world more. You have more power. And I think there's this big feedback loop between knowing the world and what goes into your mind. So I think that's the best way. We said a couple of times in this conversation that meeting yourself in these new kind of fearful situations and pushing yourself is the best way to know thyself. And I think that's the truth.
Do you think yeah, do you think that's the case for you personally? Like, would you say you know yourself? Or would you say you know yourself more than you did 2 years ago? Or would you say you know yourself more than you did last week? Like, how do you conceptualize that thing? Do you think you get to a point where you know yourself, maybe you're 35, 40, 50, 60, whatever, and then it stops? Or do you think people in their 70s or 80s are still learning about themselves? I think maybe the obvious answer is yes, but I'm interested in your thoughts. And also, just to add a final thing before I let you go, I was reminded the other day that the prefrontal cortex of the brain is not developed fully until the age of 25. And I'm like, I've still got 4 years of prefrontal cortex development. Like, my brain still hasn't even fully formed yet. Like, is that why I have so much uncertainty about my sense of self and my position in the world? Will everything just kind of come together more as my brain, like, circuits become more uh, organized and myelinated? Like, yeah, I think there's that element to it that I came across or I was reminded of the other week. But how do you feel about this personally in terms of your own story?
I think we've got to think about how we're measuring this. And I think one part to measure this is if you look at like a Carl Jung personality model and you've got your whole kind of personality there, and maybe to integrate all of those parts of your personality is to know yourself. I
Mm.
think that could be a part of it. I think we're never really the same person, uh, because I think all we really are is change. The person that I am walk into uni isn't the same person I am when I get to uni, which is a weird thing. So maybe to know yourself would be to be able to predict the future based on the past. That could be one way to measure it, maybe.
Mm.
Uh, but kind of just looking at, if I'm taking all of these sort of theories and just answer the question directly, how well do I think I know myself? It's weird. I don't know if I know what I'm capable of. And I don't, because our future is just so like, it's still, we have a lot of life to live and it's still a lot ahead. So I I don't think I know what I'm capable of, and I don't think I've seen each part of me. Like, I've definitely tested myself a lot, but there's still a lot of testing still to do. Um, I, I guess, yeah, I would say I know myself better than I did, say, 2 years ago. And I think every year I've got older, I do know myself better. And, but then maybe there's a part of me that's also had to, maybe I know myself better in some ways, uh, and maybe like I don't know academically, or I know myself in what I value more. But then because of the result of that, I've had to let go of parts that I knew parts of myself as sort of a 14-year-old. That was sort of a very sort of a more sort of mischievous or social and uh, a guy that valued different things. And so if I think I'm less in touch with the 14-year-old side of me.
Mm.
Um, and I think I don't know what I'm capable of in my future, but I think I know myself of valuing similar things 2 years ago to now valuing them now. I think I know myself more than 2 years ago. So yeah, it's a weird question.
Like one thing that came through my mind while I was listening to you speak there was because when you mentioned you as a teenager, and I thought about the rough amount that I knew you back then, and how different this Jacob is to that Jacob. Like the Jacob that I used to have sleepovers with at the age of 12 to this Jacob now, they are different. Obviously, they're different because they were 12 and 21, Joel. Like, duh. But no, but like in terms of, yeah, like how they view the world is different based on all the experiences they've had and the things they've learned. And then I reflect on my own story and I go, well, all the ways that I've been shape shifting from, let's say, 14 or 16 to now, have I really been the one that orchestrated any of it? Like, did I really decide to become who I've become? Or did I just fumble into a series of experiences and take some actions that seemed right in the moment that then have got me here? Like, did I plan this out? No. And then is my
Mhm.
plan for the future just to lie and I'll just end up continuing to fumble and hopefully I'll fumble somewhere nicely if I have the right intentions? It is interesting. Like I didn't know myself because I didn't know what I was capable of. I didn't know where I'd get to. Is
Mm.
knowing yourself knowing what you want, or are they two different things? Yeah, it's a lot.
It is a lot. I think you'd like reading Camus. So I think that's something that Camus would definitely say about having about your life kind of being fate and it's just being a bit absurd and you kind of just dancing around with it and seeing what like the universe kind of has for you and not having like a proper like orchestrated plan. Um,
Mm,
and so I like your answer, but it's weird because we ask ourselves like what we want and what we value, but I guess do we come to those answers or do we just come closer to those answers? And then I might extend that with like we search for meaning, but the universe doesn't really care about us. Like there's no like answer that we say, okay, I've arrived and now I have meaning. And so this we are kind of on we are on an absurd path, and I mean the only real choice that we have is to like keep choosing life over death.
mm.
Um, and there's this kind of divorce that we're born with the mind and the world, and we try and get those connected and keep those connected. Um, and yeah, who knows who has the solution?
Yeah, and it's a tough one when you like it. Kind of to kind of close off this episode. I guess it's let's bring this back down to earth and try and link it to an experience I had this weekend. It's like so yesterday I got fouled out, right? And I got fouled out with like 5 minutes to go. It was like a 2 point game. And I knew because I was fouled out, I wasn't seeing the floor those last 5 minutes. So I unstrapped from my chair and could watch my team see if they could do it. And luckily they did. And it was like, when I realized that I wasn't going to play, there was both relief and sadness at the same time. Realizing that the result was going to be what it is, and I had no control over it anymore, apart from like shouting and encouragement on the bench, which definitely does have an impact. But let's cut those sort of minute details out of it. Sometimes maybe that's what your life is like. Like when I reflect on the last 5 years, when I really feel like my life started and I took on some real agency, what was I actually playing in the game, or was it like, when your older brother like says that you're playing Xbox with him, but really your controller's not connected. So you're just like sat with the controller in your hands, moving around buttons, but it's doing nothing to the character on the screen. But you feel like you're playing. Like or is it that we just focus on the minute details? We just wake up every day and try and do each day's obligations right, and the larger plan, the larger map, the larger path is determined by something bigger, you know? And then maybe when people go, Joel, what do you want to do with your life? Maybe the best answer is just to go whatever God wills me to do. Because I don't know. Like, if the fact that you just put it in plain terms and go, 16-year-old us would not have predicted what 21-year-old us are like. How is 21-year-old us going to know anything about 25-year-old us? They know nothing at all whatsoever. It's all illusion. And just like that feeling of being unstrapped and fouled out and knowing that the game was now out of my hands, is that relief how we should also think about our lives?
It's a full.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, see where the wind takes us. I think it's a good place to stop. I think we've done well today because we haven't had much of a plan. And I hope everyone that listening enjoyed this one. We're killing it actually on the Spotify reviews. So if you guys can keep if you haven't left a review already, please leave one, and we're gonna get to 100 in the next couple of months. So keep doing that. But yeah, thanks for everyone for listening.